I want to touch on the change that's driven by crises. I think a lot of people find themselves in that. They don't realize the repercussions of living in that sort of mode, because we are actually quite resilient. We think that we can take it, we can take it, we can take it. And it can take many years until we realize that, hey, this is not working for me. And to finally admit to yourself that change needs to happen. But it can be too late for a lot of people, you know? So I think catching ourselves before we get to that breaking point is essential. I think we kind of need to check in with ourselves. And I think that's why having those practices that you were talking about, like talk therapy, meditation, or whatever it is, we need those to make sure that we are not putting ourselves through purgatory, you know? So, yeah.
You know, I would also say that even if you do find yourself in the purgatory or you've gone past the point of no return, and I tell the story in my book about my dad going to
Yes.
prison.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Tell us
So
about that.
obviously, yeah, nobody wants to go to prison,
Yeah.
but he was convicted of wire fraud, which essentially means you were. It's kind of the government's way of saying you were scamming people. You were committing fraud, and he's got his version of the story. They've got their version of the story. But in any case, he had to go to jail to do
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And my dad was a very successful attorney. He was a trial attorney. So he had won, I think, 155 cases in a 30 or 40-year career, something crazy like that. He only lost like 7 cases. So he's very, very talented attorney. And he's in jail. And when I'm talking to him, you get 15-minute long phone calls with inmates. And all he talks about is, how he got set up and he's a political prisoner and it's not fair. And then after a little while, I noticed that he stopped talking so much about his case and he started talking about some of the other guys and their cases. Because one thing about prison is that when you're in a situation like that, usually it's because you either didn't have a good representation or you couldn't afford to hire a decent attorney.
Hmm.
And so all the guys he's talking to, they have their case files. Their attorneys have essentially abandoned them. And, you have jailhouse lawyers. Well, he's an actual lawyer. So everybody's looking at him like he's like the king of the jail because he can look at somebody's case file and read it like a children's book. And he can tell them exactly how their lawyer screwed up. They didn't file this motion. You could easily have submitted evidence and gotten this whole thing thrown out. And then he feels called to start coaching these guys for free to get them to appeal their cases. And so, again, cut a long story short, he's in there for 3 years. By the time he walked out, he had gotten close to 50 guys released from prison from coaching them on how to, not just on like filing motions and stuff, but how to present themselves in court. He would tell them, because he'd done hundreds of trials. This is how they're going to try to intimidate you. This is how they're going to speak to you. This is how you speak to the judge. This is
Hmm.
how you speak to the other lawyer, so they take you seriously. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't say this or don't. And so he prepared these guys because they had nothing else to do. So he would just spend hours and hours preparing them to go and represent themselves in court. And he ended up getting all of them released. And so when I picked him up in El Paso, one of the first things he said was that was his finest hour as an attorney. And, he's someone who's represented a lot of big name people. He made a lot of money over his career, but working with those prisoners was his true path and purpose. And so I would tell people who feel like, oh my God, I'm at a point of no return. I'm in my version of prison, just the last place I ever thought I would end up. You can still be of service. You can still be on your path, even if you took the crisis approach. And this is, again, the power of presence. You have to get out of your own head around what should have happened, and you have to just get present to what's happening right now, and you'll see the opportunities. As soon as you get into the moment, you'll see all the opportunities like a magic eye puzzle will just pop out at you, like one of those palm trees or whales or something that we're from staring at the background. And that's the power of presence.
What a powerful story. I mean, kudos to your father for finding purpose even within those circumstances, which can be perceived as so oppressive and scary, but he was able to find something he could do to contribute, even though he was in those prison walls. I mean, wow, what a exemplar he is. And I'm curious to know what did it teach you about transformation? What did seeing him, the way he handled the whole thing, how did that impact you as a person and your sense of purpose?
It just reminded me that no matter how bad it gets, you can still be of service
Yeah.
and you can still make a difference. And I would even suggest that there's something from your past that has been preparing you for these so-called bad moments to be of service and make a difference. And if you can combine those things, and again, you have to be present to it. That's the important. So the value is not being too caught up in what was supposed to happen and shoulda, coulda, woulda, and
Yeah.
if only I had done this or that. And so the way I define presence is it's the absence of worry and regret. Okay. When you're worried, you're focused on the future. The extreme version of that is anxiety. That means you're stuck in the future because you're just anxious all the time. You're not sure what's going to happen or what's supposed to happen. Regret is when you're stuck in the past. The extreme version of that is circumstantial depression. So that means an event happened, years have passed, and you're still stuck in that event. If only I had done this, if only I had done that, if only I had taken a different path that day, I would not have gotten to the accident. If only I had said this thing, it would not have led to this horrible thing that happened. Right. And when we're stuck in the future or the past, it's very difficult to be present, which
Yeah.
means there are all kinds of insights and epiphanies and serendipitous moments that are around us right now, but we're not available to them because we're still focused on the past or on the future.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is we need to cultivate more trust. Trust can displace past regret and future worry. Trust meaning I'm trusting that where I am right now is exactly where I'm supposed to be for my unique path and purpose. And so that's what stillness helps to facilitate is trust, right? Because when you close your eyes and meditate, as awful as it can seem for some people who just have a very difficult time sitting with themselves, if you can forget about trying to practice meditation, right? See it as a trust simulator. You're trusting that what you're experiencing internally is what's supposed to be happening. So, in other words, taking all the judgment, all of the expectation out of the experience. And ironically, when you can do that, when you can sit with your eyes closed, with no expectation of any result, and with no anticipation of what you think should be happening, that's when it happens. That's when you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
drop
yeah.
in
Yeah.
to this really
You're in
beautiful,
a void,
blissful.
you're in that vacuum, and then suddenly it appears.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
get real time feedback on the power of trust. And
Yeah.
then it's not possible to do that morning after morning and not have it carry over into your day to day life where things don't go your way for 5 minutes. And you're able to say to yourself, you know what? I don't know why that just happened. That's very screwed up, but I think something positive is going to come from this. You don't want to be stuck in your head around trying to intellectualize this. You want this to be an automated response as
Yeah.
much as possible. And then and create space between the thing happening, which you may judge as an offense, and your response to it being, you know what, it's okay, a positive spin on it, right?
Yeah.
And that just buys you more time to see the insight or get the download that is surrounding that moment, which may be, let me help these guys get out of prison. That's a great use of my time.
Mm. Yeah, I would imagine that requires a lot of internal work to get to
Yeah.
that place because it requires a
You have
lot
to
of
put in the work.
the emotional maturity, the amount of emotional maturity you need, and to be in a space where you won't sort of be infected by other people's energy. Because if you're in a work environment or if you're around family or friends who have that tendency to worry and to ruminate and to just stir up drama,
Yeah.
it would be harder to stay in that state of presence and calm that you are talking about. So, I mean, you do talk about designing environments and being in places that can sort of make it easier to make changes in our lives, and in this case, be in a state of calm and presence, and to cultivate that sense of equanimity.